The millionaire's scorned daughter married the waiter from her restaurant against her father's will. At the end of the ceremony, something happened that left everyone speechless. Evelyn Calloway stared out of the massive floor-to-ceiling windows in her father's mansion, watching the world pass by outside. From this high, it all looked so peaceful. Cars moving smoothly along Charleston streets, people walking with purpose, seemingly free. Yet inside the luxurious mansion, Evelyn felt anything but free. Despite the vast riches surrounding her, she lived in a gilded cage, one her father had carefully constructed over the years. Her father, Richard Calloway, the owner of a vast restaurant empire, had raised her with every privilege imaginable. She had access to the finest education, the most luxurious clothing, and a lifestyle most people could only dream of. But what Evelyn longed for most was something money couldn't buy: freedom and love untainted by wealth or social expectations. Her father's expectations weighed heavily on her shoulders, and it was a weight she could never quite escape. Richard was a controlling figure in Evelyn's life. He wasn't a cruel man by nature, but his expectations were rigid, and his plans for her future already set in stone. He envisioned her marrying one of his business associates, someone rich and influential who could further the family legacy. The problem was, Evelyn didn't want that. She didn't care about business deals or societal status. She wanted to carve out a path of her own, far from the world her father was determined to keep her trapped in. It was during one of her many obligations, this time a charity event at one of her father's high-end restaurants, when Evelyn's life took an unexpected turn. She was seated at a table, surrounded by influential figures, forced to smile and nod through boring conversations about mergers and market shares. In a moment of sheer boredom, her eyes wandered across the room, landing on someone she had never seen before. He was standing by the bar, a simple white shirt rolled up at the sleeves, black pants, nothing flashy. His hair was dark, slightly tousled, and his posture was relaxed, completely unaffected by the wealthy crowd around him. He didn't belong to this world, Evelyn thought instantly. And that was exactly what intrigued her. This man, amidst the luxury and glamour, seemed so out of place, so normal. That normalcy was what Evelyn craved most. Evelyn soon found out his name was Logan, a waiter at the restaurant. It didn't take long before their paths crossed, not by chance, but by her own subtle orchestration. A forgotten purse, a casual conversation at the bar. It didn't take much for her to create opportunities to speak with him. Logan didn't treat her like everyone else did. He wasn't intimidated by her last name or her wealth. He saw her as a person, not just Richard Calloway's daughter. What started as simple conversations grew into something more. Logan was different from anyone Evelyn had ever known. He was humble, grounded, and kind. He wasn't caught up in the games of power and wealth that surrounded her every day. Logan treated her as an equal, and that's what Evelyn found refreshing, even liberating. She wasn't the rich heiress to him. She was just Evelyn. Of course, they had to keep their relationship hidden. There was no way Richard would approve of his daughter, the heiress to his multi-million-dollar empire, being involved with a waiter. So, Evelyn and Logan met in secret. Late-night walks, drives out to the coast, quiet dinners in places far from her usual haunts. It was during these moments that Evelyn felt truly free. Logan didn't care about her status or her father's wealth, and that made her fall for him even more. She could laugh with him, talk to him, and feel normal for once in her life. But Evelyn knew the risks. Her father had eyes everywhere, especially within his own restaurants. It wouldn't take long for someone to notice her growing closeness with Logan and report it back to Richard. The thought of what her father might do if he found out scared her, but it also pushed her further into Logan's arms. She didn't want to live under Richard's thumb anymore. She was ready to fight for her happiness, even if it meant going against the man who had controlled every aspect of her life. One evening, as they sat on the hood of Logan's old truck, parked on a cliffside overlooking the ocean, Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. The cool breeze carried the salty scent of the sea, and the stars above them twinkled in the clear night sky. It was moments like these that Evelyn cherished. "I wish we didn't have to hide," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the waves crashing below. Logan wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. I know, but your dad. Evelyn sighed deeply. He'll never accept this. Us. Logan was silent for a moment before replying. Then we'll have to figure something out. I won't lose you, Evelyn. We'll find a way to be together. I promise. His words gave her hope, but deep down, Evelyn knew that their time in hiding was running out. Richard was a man who always got what he wanted, and he wouldn't let something, or someone, as simple as love get in the way of his carefully laid plans for his daughter. Yet, Evelyn couldn't let go of the one person who made her feel truly alive. Evelyn could feel the thrill and danger of her secret relationship with Logan growing by the day. Each encounter, whether it was a late-night phone call or a stolen moment in the park, made her heart race. She had never experienced anything like this before. For the first time in her life, she wasn't living by her father's strict rules. She was doing something for herself, something that made her feel alive. But as much as she cherished their time together, the looming fear of Richard finding out weighed heavily on her. Logan, on the other hand, remained calm. He didn't come from a world of high expectations and suffocating pressure. He knew how to live simply, how to enjoy the small moments. And that was something Evelyn admired. Whenever she was with him, she felt like she could finally breathe. But even Logan couldn't fully understand the depth of the consequences they would face if Richard discovered their relationship. One evening, after slipping away from a charity gala, Evelyn met Logan in a quiet part of the city park. The night was crisp, and the stars were hidden behind a thin veil of clouds. Logan stood waiting under a large oak tree, his hands in his pockets, looking up at the sky. The sight of him, standing there so peacefully, made Evelyn's heart swell with affection. I can't stay long, Evelyn said as she approached, glancing over her shoulder as if she half expected someone to be following her. Logan smiled softly and reached out to take her hand. It's okay. I'm just glad you're here. For a few minutes, they walked in silence, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravel path. There was something about the stillness of the night that made their secret meetings feel like they were the only two people in the world. But even in those moments of calm, the weight of the reality they were living under never fully disappeared. Do you ever think about what happens if your father finds out? Logan asked, his voice low and serious. Evelyn hesitated. It was a question she had asked herself many times, but the answer always filled her with dread. I don't know, she admitted. He's not just overprotective, he's controlling. If he finds out about us, I'm afraid of what he'll do. Logan squeezed her hand reassuringly. I'm not going to let anything happen to you, Evelyn. Whatever it takes, we'll figure it out. But as much as Logan tried to reassure her, the truth was that Evelyn wasn't just afraid of her father's reaction. She was afraid of losing Logan. She had seen firsthand what her father was capable of when someone crossed him. Richard wasn't a man who took kindly to being disobeyed, especially by his own daughter. The stakes became even higher a few days later when one of the staff members at the restaurant noticed Evelyn spending more time with Logan. The whispers began to spread, and before long, rumors of a romance between the heiress and the waiter reached the ears of Richard Calloway's business associates. Though none of them dared to confront Richard directly, it was only a matter of time before someone close enough to him decided to bring it up. The tension weighed heavily on Evelyn. She couldn't keep sneaking around forever, and as much as she loved Logan, the reality of their situation began to gnaw at her. She didn't want to lose him, but she also didn't want to live a life of constant secrecy and fear. The more she thought about it, the more trapped she felt. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't come up with a solution that didn't end in disaster. Logan, however, refused to let the weight of their situation get in the way of what they had. He was determined to find a way for them to be together, no matter the cost. You're worth fighting for, he told her one evening after they had met for dinner at a small, out-of-the-way diner. I don't care what your father thinks. I don't care how hard it gets. I'm not giving up on us. Evelyn's heart ached at his words, torn between the overwhelming love she felt for him and the fear of what would come next. As they finished their meal, the tension between them softened for a moment, replaced by the simple joy of being together. They sat in the dimly lit corner booth, talking for hours about their dreams and the life they wanted to build, one free from the burdens of wealth and expectations. But even in the warmth of that moment, they both knew that their time in the shadows was limited. Evelyn's father would eventually find out. It was inevitable. One evening, as they sat together on Logan's couch in his small apartment, Evelyn's phone buzzed incessantly. She glanced at the screen, several missed calls from her father. She felt her stomach churn with anxiety. Richard never called her this many times unless something was wrong. "I have to go," Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly. Logan looked at her, concern etched across his face. "Do you think he knows?" he asked. Evelyn bit her lip, feeling the weight of the question sink into her chest. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I'm afraid to find out." She left Logan's apartment that night with a heavy heart, knowing that their time of secrecy was running out faster than she had anticipated. And though they had promised to fight for their love, Evelyn knew that a storm was brewing, and it was only a matter of time before it reached them. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as Evelyn sat at the edge of her bed, her heart racing. She knew she couldn't avoid her father any longer. After a restless night, the tension was unbearable. Richard had left countless missed calls on her phone, and each one felt like a ticking time bomb. With every second that passed, she knew she was closer to facing him, and the inevitable fallout from her relationship with Logan. She took a deep breath, stood up, and smoothed down her dress, her hands shaking slightly. This confrontation had been building for weeks, and now it was unavoidable. Her father wasn't one to ignore anything out of place in his world, especially not when it came to her. Evelyn knew the time had come to face the music. As she descended the grand staircase of the mansion, the polished marble beneath her feet gleamed coldly, mirroring the knot in her stomach. She could already hear Richard's voice coming from his office, low and serious, likely discussing business matters with one of his many associates. But when Evelyn stepped into the doorway, his conversation stopped abruptly. Richard looked up, his steely blue eyes locking onto hers. "Evelyn," he said, his tone flat. "Sit down. We need to talk." Her heart hammered in her chest as she complied, sinking into the leather armchair opposite his desk. She could feel the weight of his scrutiny, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. "I've heard some very interesting things lately," Richard began, his voice measured. But there was a sharpness to it that made Evelyn's skin prickle with unease. "Rumors, really, and I want to hear from you if there's any truth to them." Evelyn swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. She knew what was coming, but hearing the words from her father's mouth made the situation feel all the more real. "I've been told you've been seeing one of the staff," Richard continued, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Logan, I believe his name is." Evelyn froze. There it was. The truth laid bare, with no more room to hide. Her father had discovered the very thing she had been dreading. For a moment, she considered lying, denying everything and pretending nothing had happened. But that wasn't who she was, and Logan deserved better than that. "Yes, Dad. I've been seeing Logan," Evelyn admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell deathly silent for a moment. Richard's expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to chill. He stood up slowly, walking around the desk to stand in front of her. His presence loomed over her, casting a shadow on the room. Evelyn braced herself for the explosion she knew was coming. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" Richard's voice was low, but the anger simmered beneath the surface. "Do you understand what this could do to you? To us? You are throwing away everything I've worked for." Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. "I'm not throwing anything away, Dad. I love him. Logan isn't like the people you surround yourself with. He cares about me for who I am, not because of your money or your name." Richard let out a bitter laugh. "Love? You think this is about love? This is about you being manipulated by a nobody who sees you as his ticket to a better life." Evelyn's heart sank at her father's words. She had expected him to be angry, but this level of cruelty caught her off guard. "Logan isn't like that," she said, her voice shaking. "He doesn't care about money. He doesn't care about—" "Enough!" Richard's voice boomed, silencing her. He stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "You will end this absurd fling. I didn't raise you to be a fool, Evelyn. You will marry someone worthy of this family, someone who understands what it means to be a Calloway." Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wasn't a child anymore. She couldn't let her father control her life forever. For so long, she had lived under his thumb, bending to his every demand, following the path he had set for her. But not this time. This time, she had to stand up for herself, for her own happiness. "I won't end it, Dad," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her gut. "I love Logan, and I'm not going to walk away from him just because you don't approve." Richard's eyes narrowed, and the anger that had been simmering finally broke through. "If you continue down this path, you will regret it, Evelyn. I will not allow you to throw your life away for some waiter." His words stung, but Evelyn refused to back down. "It's my life, not yours. You can't control me forever." Richard's face hardened, and for a moment, Evelyn thought he might strike her, but instead, he stepped back, his expression icy and unreadable. "Fine," he said coldly. "But if you go through with this, you will no longer be a part of this family. No more support, no more inheritance. You'll have nothing." Evelyn's heart clenched at the finality of his words, but she didn't let it show. She had made her choice, and as much as it hurt, she wasn't going to back down now. "I'd rather have nothing and be with someone I love than live my life by your rules." Richard stared at her for a long, tense moment before turning away. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A mistake you'll never recover from." Evelyn stood up, her legs shaking beneath her, and walked out of the room without looking back. She knew there was no turning back now. Evelyn's mind spun as she left her father's office, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. The mansion felt colder than usual, its vastness no longer a comfort, but a reminder of the rift that had just been created. Her father's ultimatum hung over her like a dark cloud. Continue her relationship with Logan and lose everything, or end it and remain in the life she had always known. But how could she go back to that life now? How could she abandon the one person who made her feel free? Over the next few days, the tension in the Calloway household only intensified. Richard didn't speak to Evelyn, choosing instead to communicate through the house staff, and when they did cross paths, his icy glares made it clear that the divide between them was deepening. The rest of Charleston's elite had begun to catch wind of the scandal, and whispers circulated about the Calloway heiress and her relationship with a lowly waiter. It didn't take long for the pressure to start building from the outside as well. At one of the many charity events Evelyn was expected to attend, her father's business associates and their wives greeted her with tight-lipped smiles, their eyes filled with judgment. The whispers followed her wherever she went, each one more cutting than the last. "Did you hear? Richard's daughter is dating a waiter? I heard Richard is furious. She's going to ruin everything." Evelyn held her head high, pretending not to hear the murmurs. She had always been the perfect daughter, the perfect hostess, never once stepping out of line. But now, she was the source of gossip, and it was clear that her father's social circle was turning against her. The weight of their judgment was suffocating, but Evelyn refused to let it break her. She had chosen Logan, and she wasn't going to back down. Richard, however, wasn't about to let things continue without a fight. He began his next move with cold precision, using his influence and power to pressure Logan from the sidelines. It started with subtle things: extra shifts at the restaurant, sudden schedule changes, and rumors about Logan's supposed unreliability. Logan's co-workers began to whisper about him, questioning why he was still employed when there were so many rumors surrounding him and Evelyn. One afternoon, Logan received a call from his manager. The voice on the other end was curt, informing him that he would be transferred to a less desirable location, away from the bustling heart of Charleston, where the tips were good and the clientele wealthy. It was a clear demotion, though no reason was given. Logan knew better, though. This was Richard Calloway's doing, an attempt to push him out of Evelyn's life by making things as difficult as possible for him. When Logan told Evelyn about the demotion, her heart sank. She knew her father wouldn't sit idly by, but seeing the direct consequences of his influence was harder than she had expected. "This is just the beginning," Logan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "He's going to do everything in his power to make sure we don't stay together." Evelyn's hands trembled with anger. "He can't control everything," she said fiercely. "He doesn't get to decide who I love." But Logan wasn't as optimistic. He had grown up in a world very different from Evelyn's, and he knew how powerful men like Richard operated. They didn't give up easily. "Evelyn," he said softly, taking her hand, "I don't want you to get hurt. He's your father. He's got resources I can't compete with." Evelyn's eyes filled with determination. "I don't care about his resources. I don't care about the money. I care about you." Logan smiled at her, but the worry in his eyes didn't fade. "I'm not going to let him come between us," he said, "but we need to be smart about this. He's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." The days dragged on, and the pressure from Richard mounted. He began introducing Evelyn to wealthy suitors, each more polished and successful than the last. Every week, a new man was paraded in front of her, dressed in designer suits and spouting empty promises of a life of luxury and power. Richard never said it directly, but the message was clear. Any one of these men would be a better match for her than Logan. Evelyn sat through each meeting in silence, smiling politely but never engaging. Her father's attempts to manipulate her into a marriage of convenience only strengthened her resolve to stay with Logan. These men were exactly what she didn't want: shallow, interested only in her family name and fortune. None of them cared about her as a person, but Logan did. One evening, after a particularly uncomfortable dinner with yet another one of her father's chosen suitors, Evelyn couldn't take it anymore. She stormed into Richard's study, where he sat behind his large oak desk, reviewing some business papers. "Enough!" she shouted, slamming the door behind her. Richard barely looked up from his papers. "I assume this is about our guest tonight," he said coolly. "This is about you trying to control my life," Evelyn snapped. "I told you I'm not interested in these men. I'm with Logan, and I'm not going to change that just because it doesn't fit into your plans." Richard's eyes finally met hers, cold and calculating. "Logan is not part of this family. He never will be. The sooner you accept that, the sooner we can move forward." Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. "This isn't about family, Dad. It's about you controlling everything. But I'm not a child anymore. I can make my own choices. And I've chosen Logan." Richard stood up slowly, walking around the desk to stand in front of her. "You're throwing away your future for someone who has nothing to offer you." "I'd rather have nothing and be with someone I love than live a life where I'm just another pawn in your business deals," Evelyn fired back. The tension between them crackled like a live wire. Neither was willing to back down, but Evelyn knew this was only the beginning of her fight for independence. The battle lines had been drawn. The tension between Evelyn and her father had reached a boiling point, and Logan could feel the weight of it pressing down on both of them. Despite the love that Evelyn and Logan shared, Richard's influence seemed to creep into every aspect of their lives, creating obstacles at every turn. Logan was beginning to understand just how powerful Richard truly was. This wasn't just a battle of wills. It was a war for control, and Richard was determined to win at any cost. Logan had never imagined himself in a situation like this. He had always lived a simple life, one free from the complications of wealth and influence. His work as a waiter had been enough for him, allowing him to live comfortably and without stress. But being with Evelyn had changed everything. Now, he found himself at the center of a struggle that was far bigger than anything he had ever dealt with. One evening, as they sat together in Logan's small apartment, the pressure became too much for him to bear. The dim light from the lamp on the side table cast long shadows across the room, making the space feel even smaller. Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder, her fingers tracing small patterns on the fabric of his shirt. There was a peacefulness to their time together, but it was always overshadowed by the looming presence of her father's disapproval. "I've been thinking," Logan said quietly, breaking the silence. Evelyn looked up at him, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "About what?" Logan hesitated, not wanting to hurt her but knowing he had to say what was on his mind. "About us. About everything that's happening with your dad. It's getting harder, Evelyn." She sat up straight, her brow furrowing with concern. "I know it's hard, but we can handle this. We just have to stick together." Logan shook his head, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "It's not just about sticking together, Evelyn. Your dad is making things impossible for me. He's pulling strings at the restaurant, talking to people about me behind my back, and making it harder for me to even keep my job. I'm being transferred to another location because of him. He's not going to stop until he pushes me out completely." Evelyn's heart sank. She had known her father was interfering, but hearing the impact it was having on Logan's life made it all the more real. "I'm so sorry, Logan. I didn't realize how far he was going." Logan reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "It's not your fault, but I'm worried about what he'll do next. He's not just targeting me. He's targeting us. And I don't want to put you in a position where you have to choose between me and your family." Evelyn's eyes filled with determination. "I've already made my choice. I chose you. My father can't control my life anymore." Logan smiled weakly, appreciating her strength, but he still wasn't convinced. "You say that now, but what happens when things get even worse? He's going to keep coming at us, and I don't know if I can keep putting you through that. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." Evelyn's heart ached at the thought. She knew Logan was right in some ways. Her father wasn't going to give up easily, but she also knew that walking away from Logan wasn't an option for her. "You're not the reason I'd lose anything, Logan. I'm not losing anything by being with you. I'm gaining a life of freedom and love, and that's worth more than anything my father could offer." Logan sighed, conflicted. He loved Evelyn more than anything, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was dragging her into a battle she didn't deserve. I don't want to see you get hurt." Evelyn leaned in, resting her forehead against his. "I'd rather go through all of this with you than live a life without you. We'll figure it out together." For a moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift as they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms. But Logan couldn't shake the nagging thought in the back of his mind that maybe, just maybe, the best thing he could do for Evelyn was to let her go. Over the next few days, Logan wrestled with the decision. He loved Evelyn more than anything, but the more he thought about it, the more he wondered if leaving her would be the only way to protect her from her father's wrath. Richard was relentless, and Logan feared that as long as they were together, Evelyn would suffer. One evening, Logan sat alone in his apartment, staring at his phone. He had considered calling Evelyn to tell her what he was thinking, but the words just wouldn't come. He knew how much it would hurt her, and the thought of causing her pain was unbearable. But wasn't it better to hurt her now than to drag her through a lifetime of misery caused by her father's interference? As he sat there, contemplating the future, a knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Evelyn standing there, her eyes filled with concern. She had sensed something was wrong. Logan had been distant lately, and she couldn't bear the thought of losing him without understanding why. "Logan," she said softly, stepping inside. "What's going on? You've been so quiet lately, and I'm worried." Logan looked down at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. "I've just been thinking," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "About everything. About us. I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep fighting your dad." Evelyn reached out, lifting his chin so their eyes met. "We're stronger together, Logan. Don't you see that? I don't care what my father does. I want to be with you. I love you." Logan's resolve faltered as he looked into her eyes, filled with love and determination. He had been ready to make the hardest decision of his life. But standing there with Evelyn, he realized that walking away wasn't the answer. They had something worth fighting for, something her father could never understand. "I love you too," Logan whispered, pulling her into his arms. "And I'm not going anywhere." Together, they faced an uncertain future. But one thing was clear. Their love was stronger than Richard's control, and they weren't going to let him tear them apart. The weight of their decision hung heavy over Evelyn and Logan, but they both knew what had to be done. Richard's influence in Charleston was suffocating, and the constant pressure of his disapproval loomed over every moment of their relationship. Evelyn had grown tired of fighting against the inevitable. Her father wasn't going to stop. There was no future for them in Charleston, not with Richard pulling strings and trying to destroy their love at every turn. They needed to take control of their own lives, and there was only one way to do that. It was Evelyn who suggested the plan. She had been thinking about it for days, lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling as her mind raced through all the possible consequences. But no matter how much she feared her father's wrath, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the only way to finally be free. One evening, as they sat together in Logan's apartment, she turned to him, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We need to leave," Evelyn said quietly. "We need to get out of Charleston." Logan looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" Evelyn took a deep breath, knowing the gravity of what she was about to suggest. "We can't stay here, Logan. Not with my father constantly trying to control everything. We need to go somewhere else, somewhere far away from him. I've been thinking about it. And we could go to Savannah. We could start fresh. Just the two of us." Logan was silent for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He had thought about leaving Charleston before, but he had never been sure if Evelyn would actually be willing to go through with it. Now, hearing her say it out loud, he felt a surge of hope, a chance for them to finally have the life they wanted, away from the shadow of Richard Calloway. "Are you sure?" Logan asked, his voice soft but serious. "I don't want to make you give up everything." "I'm not giving up anything," Evelyn replied, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm choosing us. I'm choosing a life where we can be happy, where we don't have to look over our shoulders every second. I don't care about the money or the status. I care about being with you." Logan's heart swelled at her words, and in that moment, he knew that they were in this together. They were going to build a new life, free from the expectations and manipulations of her father. The next few days were a whirlwind of quiet preparation. They couldn't tell anyone about their plans, not even the few close friends Evelyn had. Her father had eyes everywhere, and any hint of their departure could send him into a tailspin. So they kept things secret, gathering only what they needed for a quick escape. Evelyn didn't take much, just a few clothes, some personal items, and the most important thing of all, her mother's necklace, the only item of real sentimental value she had. The night they left, the air was thick with anticipation. Logan had borrowed a friend's car to avoid being followed, and they drove in silence for the first hour, neither of them wanting to say anything that might jinx their escape. It wasn't until they crossed the state line into Georgia that Evelyn finally relaxed, leaning back in her seat and letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "We're really doing this," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Logan glanced over at her, smiling softly. "Yeah, we are." As they drove into Savannah, the city's historic charm wrapped around them like a warm embrace. The moss-draped oak trees, the cobblestone streets, and the quiet elegance of the old buildings made it feel like they had stepped into a different world, one where Richard's reach couldn't touch them. They found a small, cozy inn to stay in for the night. And though it was nothing compared to the luxurious hotels Evelyn was used to, it felt perfect. There was no pretension here, no weight of expectation, just the two of them, together. The next morning, Logan woke up early, slipping out of bed to make arrangements. He knew Evelyn wanted a simple wedding, far from the extravagance of her former life, and he was determined to make it special. He found a small chapel on the outskirts of the city, one that looked out over the Savannah River. It was quiet, intimate, and exactly what they needed. When he returned to the inn, Evelyn was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in awe of the fact that they had really done it. They had left Charleston, left her father's world behind. But the nerves began to creep in as Logan explained the plan for the day. They would be married in a few short hours. It was everything she had wanted, yet the enormity of it all made her heart race. "Are you okay?" Logan asked, sitting beside her. Evelyn nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "It's just happening so fast." Logan smiled, taking her hands in his. "We don't have to do it today. We can wait if you need more time." But Evelyn shook her head. "No, I don't want to wait. I've waited long enough to be free. Let's do it. Let's get married today." The wedding was everything Evelyn had dreamed of, and nothing like the grand, over-the-top ceremonies she had attended in Charleston. There were no lavish floral arrangements, no expensive designer gowns, no cameras documenting every moment. Instead, it was just her and Logan, standing together in the small chapel, exchanging vows that were filled with love and hope for the future. As they walked out of the chapel, hand in hand, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the river, Evelyn felt lighter than she had in years. This was their beginning, a fresh start away from everything that had held them back. But just as they reached the steps of the chapel, a figure appeared, standing at the edge of the pathway. The man's face was unfamiliar, but the expression he wore was serious. "Logan," the man called out, stepping forward. "There's something you need to know." The figure who had appeared at the chapel steps was unfamiliar to Evelyn, but the way Logan stiffened beside her made her realize that whoever this man was, he wasn't a stranger to him. Evelyn's heart raced as she watched the man approach. His eyes locked on Logan with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "What's going on?" Evelyn whispered, gripping Logan's hand a little tighter. Logan didn't answer immediately. His jaw clenched as he took a step forward, putting himself between Evelyn and the stranger. "What are you doing here, Paul?" Logan asked, his voice low and wary. Paul, tall, dressed in a sharp suit that seemed out of place in the quiet setting of the chapel, paused just a few feet away. He ignored Evelyn completely, his focus solely on Logan. "I tried to reach you before, but you disappeared. I had no idea where you went until now. You can't keep running, Logan. It's time you face the truth." Logan's face paled, and Evelyn could feel the tension radiating off him. She had never seen him like this before, and it terrified her. "What is he talking about, Logan?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Before Logan could respond, Paul took another step forward. "Evelyn, is it? There's something you need to know about your new husband." Evelyn's stomach churned. She had always known there were parts of Logan's life he hadn't shared with her, but they had built their relationship on love and trust. Now, standing at the threshold of their new life together, she wasn't sure if she was ready to hear whatever truth Paul was about to reveal. Logan turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and desperation. "Evelyn, I was going to tell you everything, I swear, but not like this." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "Tell me what, Logan?" Before Logan could speak, Paul cut in, his voice cold and direct. "Logan isn't who he says he is. He's not just some simple waiter you met in Charleston. He's the heir to a fortune, one even larger than your father's. He walked away from his family's money to live a different life, but they've been trying to find him for years. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, thick and suffocating. Evelyn stared at Logan, her mind reeling. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Logan looked down, his expression pained. "Yes, it's true," he admitted quietly. "I left my family's wealth behind because I didn't want that life. I didn't want the pressure, the expectations, the manipulation. I wanted to find something real, something that wasn't tied to money, and then I met you." Evelyn felt like the ground had been pulled out from beneath her. Everything she thought she knew about Logan, about their relationship, had just been turned upside down. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Logan took a step closer, reaching for her hand, but Evelyn pulled away, her mind spinning with confusion and hurt. "Because I didn't want you to look at me the way everyone else does," Logan said, his voice breaking. "I didn't want you to think I was just another rich guy trying to escape. I needed you to love me for who I really am, not for the money I left behind." Evelyn's heart ached, torn between the love she felt for Logan and the betrayal of having this massive secret kept from her. She had left everything behind for him, choosing a life of simplicity and love. And now she was finding out that the man she had married had more wealth and power than her father ever could have imagined. Paul, in sensing the emotional weight of the moment, spoke again, his tone more measured. "Your family has been searching for you, Logan. They need you to come back and take your rightful place. They need you to help run the family business." Logan shook his head. "I'm not going back. I've told you this before. That life isn't for me." Evelyn watched the exchange in silence, her mind whirling with questions. Was this why Logan had kept his past a secret? Was this why he had wanted to escape Charleston so desperately? Paul sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I don't think you understand the seriousness of the situation. Your family's company is on the verge of collapse. They need you, Logan. You're the only one who can save it." Logan turned to Evelyn, his expression pleading. "I don't want that life. I want you. I don't care about the money or the company. I care about us." Evelyn's emotions swirled in a storm of confusion. She had just married this man, thinking she knew everything about him, only to discover that there was an entire world of wealth and responsibility that he had hidden from her. Could she really trust him after this? Could their love survive such a massive revelation? "I need some time," Evelyn whispered, stepping back from Logan. Her chest tightened with the weight of the situation, and she needed space to breathe. Logan's face fell, his eyes filled with pain. "Evelyn, please don't do this. I just need time to think," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. With that, she turned and walked down the chapel steps, leaving Logan and Paul standing in silence. As Evelyn walked away, her mind raced. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, her wedding day. But now, everything was in question. She had left her family behind for Logan, only to discover that he had kept a secret that could change everything. What was she supposed to do now? Could she forgive him? Could she still build a future with him, knowing the truth about his past? And worse, what would her father do when he found out about all of this? She knew Richard wouldn't take this revelation lightly. Unbeknownst to Evelyn, Richard was already gathering information, furious and ready to take action. Evelyn walked away from the chapel, her thoughts tangled in a web of emotions. The revelation that Logan wasn't the man she thought he was had shaken her to the core. As she made her way down the quiet Savannah streets, the peaceful charm of the city did little to calm the storm inside her. How could he have kept something so monumental from her? Her mind raced with questions. Was Logan really the man she had fallen in love with? Or was he just another player in the game of wealth and power, like her father? She found a small bench in a park not far from the river and sat down, her head in her hands. She had fought so hard for their love, walked away from everything she had known, only to find herself caught in the very world she had tried to escape. Back at the chapel, Logan stood frozen on the steps, watching Evelyn disappear into the distance. His heart ached with the knowledge that he had hurt her. He had wanted to tell her the truth, but every time he had come close, the fear of losing her had stopped him. Now, it seemed, his worst fear was coming true. Paul, still standing nearby, cleared his throat. "You should have told her sooner." Logan turned to face him, his expression hardening. "I didn't need you to show up and ruin everything." "I didn't ruin anything," Paul replied, crossing his arms. "You did that by keeping secrets. You knew this would come out eventually. You can't run from who you are forever." Logan clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him. "I didn't want that life, Paul. I didn't want any part of it. All I ever wanted was to live a normal life, to find someone who loved me for me, not for my last name, not for the money." "And you found that," Paul said, "but you built your relationship on a lie. Did you really think you could hide your past from her forever?" Logan looked away, unable to respond. He had never wanted to hurt Evelyn, but Paul was right. He should have told her the truth from the start. Now, everything they had built was hanging by a thread, and he didn't know how to fix it. "I'm not going back, Paul," Logan said after a long silence. "Tell my family I'm done. I've made my choice." Paul shook his head. "It's not that simple, Logan. The family business is in trouble. They need you." "I don't care," Logan snapped. "They can figure it out without me. I'm not their puppet anymore." Paul sighed, clearly frustrated. "You're walking away from everything, from your family, from your responsibility. Is that really the kind of man you want to be?" Logan didn't answer. He turned and walked back into the chapel, needing space to think. As much as he hated the pressure from his family, Paul's words struck a nerve. Was he running away from his responsibility? Was he being selfish by turning his back on the business, on everything his family had built? But even as those thoughts swirled in his mind, one thing was clear. He couldn't lose Evelyn. She was the one thing in his life that made sense, the one person who saw him for who he really was. He had to make this right. He had to find a way to fix the mess he had created. While Logan wrestled with his thoughts, Richard Calloway was seething in his office in Charleston. The news had reached him sooner than expected. Evelyn and Logan had eloped. His rage knew no bounds as he paced back and forth, his fists clenched at his sides. He had lost control, and it was unacceptable. "How could she do this?" Richard muttered under his breath. "After everything I've done for her." His assistant, Rebecca, stood nervously by the door, unsure whether to speak. She had never seen Richard this angry before, and the tension in the room was palpable. "Get me everything we have on Logan," Richard ordered, his voice low and menacing. "I want to know everything about him, his background, his connections, everything. If he thinks he can take my daughter away from me, he's got another thing coming." Rebecca nodded quickly and left the room, leaving Richard alone with his thoughts. As he stared out the window, his mind raced with plans to bring Evelyn back and destroy the man who had taken her from him. Logan had made a grave mistake by marrying his daughter, and Richard wasn't going to let it go unpunished. Back in Savannah, Evelyn remained on the park bench, staring out at the river as the sun began to set. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Logan approach until he was standing right beside her. "Can I sit?" he asked softly. Evelyn glanced up at him, her heart still heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. She nodded silently, and Logan sat down beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the city and the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. "I'm sorry," Logan said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I never wanted to hurt you, Evelyn. I didn't want you to see me the way everyone else does." Evelyn turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and confusion. "I don't understand, Logan. Why didn't you trust me with the truth?" Logan took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Because I've spent my whole life trying to get away from that world. The money, the pressure, the expectations, it's suffocating. I wanted to be someone else. I wanted to find something real. And with you? I did. Evelyn's eyes softened, but the pain was still there. But you lied to me. How am I supposed to trust you now? Logan reached for her hand, holding it gently. I know I broke your trust, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if I have to. But please, Evelyn, don't let this be the end of us. I love you. That's the only truth that's ever mattered to me. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, her heart torn between love and betrayal. She still loved Logan. She couldn't deny that. But the hurt ran deep. She needed time to process everything, to figure out what came next. I don't know, she whispered. I need time. Logan nodded, his heart heavy. Take all the time you need. I'll wait for you. Evelyn, I'm not going anywhere. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, Evelyn and Logan sat in silence, both knowing that their future was uncertain, but their love was still there, fragile but alive. As the night deepened, Evelyn and Logan walked quietly back to the inn. The streets of Savannah were peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing between them. Inside, Evelyn's mind churned with emotions, hurt, love, confusion. She had always known Logan was different, that he wasn't just another wealthy, entitled man like her father's business partners. That was what had drawn her to him in the first place. But this secret had changed everything. They reached their room, and as the door closed behind them, the tension between them became palpable. Evelyn stood by the window, her back to Logan, staring out at the darkened streets. Logan watched her, unsure of what to say, knowing that words wouldn't be enough to heal the wound he had caused. He wanted to fix things. But how could he, when the very foundation of their relationship had been built on a lie? I still don't understand, Evelyn said finally, her voice soft but strained. You told me you wanted a simple life, but now I find out you left a fortune behind. Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Logan took a deep breath, knowing this moment was crucial. He walked over to her, standing close but not touching her. I didn't tell you because I didn't want that part of my life to define me, or us, my family's wealth. It's not who I am. I walked away from it because it was suffocating. I didn't want to be another rich guy, living off my family's money, and I didn't want to drag you into that world. Evelyn turned to face him, her eyes searching his for answers. But you didn't give me a choice, Logan. You made that decision for me, and that's what hurts the most. I thought we were building something real, something honest. But now, I don't know. Her words hit Logan like a punch to the gut. He had never meant to deceive her, but he understood now how much his secrecy had cost them. You're right, he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. I should have told you. I should have trusted you. But I was scared, Evelyn. I've seen how money can ruin relationships, how people change when they find out there's a fortune involved. I didn't want that to happen to us. I didn't want you to look at me the way everyone else does. Evelyn crossed her arms, her expression softening but still conflicted. I didn't fall in love with your money, Logan. I fell in love with you. The man who treated me like a person, not a name or a dollar sign. But now, I don't know if I can trust you. If you kept something this big from me, what else haven't you told me? Logan stepped closer, his voice pleading. There's nothing else, Evelyn. I swear. This was the only secret, and I was wrong to keep it from you. But everything I've ever said to you, everything we've built together, that was real. I love you, and I don't care about the money. I just want us to be together. Evelyn's heart ached with the weight of his words. She wanted to believe him, wanted to go back to the simplicity of their love before all these revelations. But the doubt lingered, gnawing at her. Could she truly trust him after this? Could they rebuild what had been shattered? I need time, she said again, her voice softer this time. I just need to think. Logan nodded, though the pain in his eyes was clear. I understand. Take all the time you need." For the next few days, they remained in Savannah, but things between them were different. There was a distance now, a quiet unease that neither of them could ignore. Evelyn spent her days walking through the historic squares, trying to clear her head, while Logan gave her the space she needed, though every minute apart felt like a lifetime. He was desperate to make things right, but he knew pushing her would only make things worse. As Evelyn wandered through the city, she thought about everything they had been through. Logan had been her escape, her chance at freedom from the world her father had built around her. With him, she had felt real, alive. But now, knowing the truth about his past, she couldn't help but feel like she had been pulled back into the very world she had tried to leave behind. She sat on a bench in Forsyth Park, watching the fountain spray water into the air, lost in thought. Could she really walk away from Logan after everything they had been through? Despite the lies, she knew one thing for certain. She loved him. That much hadn't changed. But love wasn't always enough, was it? Her thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of her phone. Glancing at the screen, she saw her father's name. Her stomach clenched. She hadn't spoken to Richard since leaving Charleston, and she had no desire to start now. But something in her gut told her she couldn't ignore him forever. With a sigh, she answered, "What do you want, Dad?" Richard's voice was sharp, as always. "I want to know where you are, Evelyn. I heard about your little elopement. Do you really think you can run away from me? From this family?" Evelyn closed her eyes, bracing herself. "I didn't run away. I chose to be with someone I love." "Love?" Richard's voice dripped with disdain. "You think love is going to save you? Logan is just like every other man who's ever come into your life, Evelyn. He'll use you and leave you. And now I hear he's been lying to you about his past. Is that what you want? To be with a liar?" The words stung, but Evelyn wasn't about to let her father manipulate her. "Logan made mistakes, but he's not like you, Dad. He doesn't control people's lives. He doesn't treat me like a business asset." Richard's tone grew cold. "You're making a mistake, Evelyn. You're throwing away everything I've worked for." "I'm not throwing anything away," Evelyn replied firmly. "I'm choosing my own life, my own path, and you can't control me anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Evelyn thought Richard might hang up. But then he spoke again, his voice eerily calm. "We'll see about that." With that, the line went dead, and Evelyn sat there, her heart pounding. She had stood up to her father before, but this time felt different. There was a finality to it, a sense that she had crossed a line from which there was no return. But even with the uncertainty that lay ahead, she knew one thing: she wasn't going back. Evelyn returned to the inn that evening, her mind clearer than it had been in days. She still didn't have all the answers, but she knew she couldn't live her life in fear of what might happen. As she stepped through the door, she found Logan sitting on the edge of the bed, his expression tired but hopeful. "Have you made your decision?" he asked quietly. Evelyn nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. "I'm not leaving you, Logan, but things have to change. No more secrets, no more lies. If we're going to make this work, we need to be honest with each other, completely." Logan stood and took her hands in his eyes filled with relief. "No more secrets," he promised. "I'm all in, Evelyn, whatever it takes." Evelyn smiled softly, feeling the weight begin to lift from her shoulders. They still had a long way to go, but for the first time since the truth had come out, she felt like they had a chance. A real chance to build something lasting, something true. Evelyn and Logan's decision to rebuild their relationship brought a sense of calm that had been missing for days. Despite the challenges and the revelations that had nearly torn them apart, they found themselves more committed to each other than ever. But even as they focused on healing their relationship, Evelyn knew that the threat of her father still loomed large. Richard Calloway was not a man to be easily dismissed, and he had made it clear that he wouldn't let her go without a fight. A week had passed since her tense conversation with Richard, and though Evelyn tried to focus on her future with Logan, the silence from her father unsettled her. She knew Richard well enough to understand that he wasn't the type to let things slide. His lack of immediate response felt ominous, like the calm before a storm. One evening, just as the sun was setting and casting a warm glow over the city, a knock came at the door of the inn where Evelyn and Logan were staying. Logan, who had been cooking dinner in the small kitchenette, looked up from the stove, exchanging a wary glance with Evelyn. Visitors were rare here, and they hadn't told anyone where they were staying. Evelyn's stomach tightened with a familiar sense of dread. Could it be her father? Logan wiped his hands on a towel and moved to the door, opening it cautiously. Standing on the threshold was a familiar figure, Richard Calloway. His sharp, businesslike demeanor was still intact, but there was something different about him this time. His usual air of dominance and control seemed to have softened, replaced by something that almost resembled vulnerability. "Dad," Evelyn said, her voice a mix of surprise and apprehension. "What are you doing here?" Richard looked at her, his eyes scanning the small room, taking in the simplicity of their new life. It was a stark contrast to the world he had raised her in, and the difference wasn't lost on him. He stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him, though he remained standing, as if unsure of his place in this unfamiliar setting. "I came to talk," Richard said, his voice more subdued than Evelyn had ever heard it. "To both of you." Evelyn exchanged a glance with Logan, who was clearly tense but silent. He had expected this moment to come eventually. Evelyn motioned for Richard to sit, though the tension in the air was palpable. "What do you want to talk about?" Evelyn asked, her tone guarded. She wasn't ready to let her guard down, not yet. Not after everything her father had done to try and control her life. Richard let out a deep sigh, running a hand over his face in a gesture that betrayed his usual composure. "I made a mistake, Evelyn. I thought I was protecting you, doing what was best for you, but I can see now that I was wrong." Evelyn's eyes widened slightly. In all the years she had known her father, she had never heard him admit to being wrong. Richard Calloway was a man who prided himself on always being in control, on always knowing what was best. Hearing him say these words felt surreal. Richard continued, his gaze shifting to Logan. "I've spent my entire life building an empire, working to secure a future for you. But in doing that, I lost sight of what really matters. I thought that if I could control everything, you would be safe, that you'd have the life I always wanted for you. But I see now that I was suffocating you." Evelyn's heart softened slightly, though the years of manipulation and control still weighed heavily on her. "You didn't just suffocate me, Dad. You tried to take away my choice, my freedom. I had to fight just to be with Logan, and you made that as difficult as possible." Richard nodded, his expression heavy with regret. "I know. I see that now. I thought Logan wasn't good enough for you because I didn't know him. I only saw what I wanted to see, a man who wasn't part of our world, who couldn't possibly understand what it takes to be with someone like you. But I was wrong." Logan, who had remained silent throughout Richard's speech, finally spoke up. "I never wanted to take Evelyn away from her family. I just wanted her to have a chance to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted." Richard looked at Logan, his eyes filled with a mix of respect and guilt. "I see that now. I've come to ask for your forgiveness, both of you. I realize that I've caused a lot of pain, and I don't expect things to be fixed overnight. But I don't want to lose you, Evelyn. I don't want to lose my daughter." Evelyn sat back in her chair, her emotions swirling. She had dreamed of this moment, her father finally acknowledging his mistakes, finally realizing that she wasn't just a pawn in his grand plan. But hearing the words now, she wasn't sure what to do with them. Could she forgive him? Could she trust that he had really changed? Or was this just another attempt to control the situation? "I don't know, Dad," Evelyn said softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "It's not that simple. You hurt me. You tried to manipulate me, to take away the one person who makes me feel free." Richard's expression faltered, and for a moment, he looked almost broken. "I know I hurt you," he admitted. "And I can't change the past, but I want to make things right, if you'll let me. I want to be part of your life, Evelyn. Your life with Logan, if you'll have me." Logan turned to Evelyn, his eyes searching hers for a sign of what she was thinking. He knew this decision wasn't his to make, it was hers. Whatever she chose, he would stand by her side. Evelyn took a deep breath, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. This was the moment she had been waiting for, but it wasn't as easy as she had thought it would be. Could she let her father back into her life? Could she trust that his intentions were genuine? "I need time to think," Evelyn said finally, her voice steady but soft. "This is a lot to process," Richard nodded, his face showing a flicker of hope. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." With that, Richard stood up. His usual air of authority diminished. He gave a small nod to Logan, who acknowledged it with a respectful nod in return. And then he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Evelyn and Logan alone once more. Evelyn sat in silence for a long moment, her mind swirling with thoughts. She had finally heard the apology she had waited for, but it didn't erase the pain of the past. It didn't erase the years of control, the manipulations, the hurt. She knew that forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for healing. Logan reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," he said softly. Evelyn smiled, grateful for his support. "I know, and that's all I need right now." The days that followed Richard's unexpected visit were a whirlwind of emotions for Evelyn. Though she had longed for her father's acknowledgement and apology, it had come too late to mend the immediate wounds. Forgiving him wouldn't be easy, and she wasn't ready to make that decision just yet. What she did know was that no matter what happened with her father, she and Logan were ready to start their new life together. Evelyn had chosen her path, and now it was time to truly embrace it. One afternoon, as Evelyn and Logan strolled through the historic streets of Savannah, hand in hand, the weight of the past seemed to lift just a little. The cobblestones under their feet, the soft breeze carrying the scent of blooming magnolias. It all felt like the beginning of something new. Something they had fought for. Something they had earned. Logan glanced at her, sensing the change in her mood. "You seem lighter today," he said with a smile. Evelyn squeezed his hand, smiling back. "I feel lighter. I think I'm finally starting to let go of everything that's been weighing me down." They walked in companionable silence for a while, the peacefulness of the city wrapping around them like a blanket. The future had felt uncertain for so long, but now, with the love they shared and the strength they had built together, it seemed full of possibility. As they reached the edge of Forsyth Park, Logan stopped, turning to face her. His expression was serious, but his eyes sparkled with the same love and warmth that had drawn Evelyn to him in the first place. "I've been thinking," Logan began, his voice soft but steady, "about what comes next for us. We've talked about leaving Charleston behind, about starting fresh, but I want to know what you want, Evelyn. What kind of life do you want to build with me?" Evelyn looked at him, her heart swelling with affection. It wasn't just the question, it was the way he asked it, with genuine care, without any expectation of what her answer might be. For so long, her life had been dictated by her father's plans, by the expectations of the world she had grown up in. But now, standing here with Logan, she realized that for the first time, the choice was entirely hers. "I want a life that feels real," Evelyn said, her voice filled with conviction. "I don't care about the money or the status. I want a life where we wake up every day and feel like we're living for ourselves, not for anyone else." I want a home, somewhere we can just be us, without all the pressure of the world we came from." Logan smiled, his heart swelling with pride for the woman standing before him. "I want that too, more than anything." They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing their dreams, their hopes for the future. They talked about finding a house in Savannah, somewhere small and cozy, where they could build a life together. Evelyn had always dreamed of a simple home with a garden, a place where she could finally feel grounded, where they could create a life far removed from the world of wealth and expectations that had haunted her for so long. But even as they planned for the future, Evelyn couldn't shake the lingering thoughts of her father. Richard had apologized, but she knew that healing their relationship would take time, if it could ever be fully healed. She hadn't told Logan yet, but part of her wanted to reach out to Richard, to see if he was truly willing to change. Maybe there was a way to move forward, not as the controlling father and obedient daughter, but as equals, as people who had finally seen each other for who they really were. That evening, after they returned to their inn, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the soft glow of the streetlights below. Logan was in the kitchen, finishing up dinner, but she barely registered the sounds around her. Her mind was elsewhere, on her father, on the past, and on the future she and Logan were building. Finally, she reached for her phone. Her heart raced as she scrolled through her contacts, stopping at her father's name. The last time they had spoken had been so charged with emotion, so filled with unresolved tension. But now, with some distance, Evelyn felt ready to take the next step, whatever that might be. She pressed the call button, holding her breath as the phone rang. After a few rings, Richard answered, his voice cautious but hopeful. "Evelyn." "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice steady. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how you want to make things right." Richard was silent for a moment, clearly surprised by the call. "I meant every word, Evelyn. I know I've hurt you, and I want to do whatever it takes to fix that." Evelyn swallowed, her emotions still raw but her resolve strong. "I'm not ready to forgive everything yet, but I do want to try. I want to see if we can rebuild something on different terms this time." A deep sigh of relief came from the other end of the line. "I'd like that. I know it'll take time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." They spoke for a while longer, carefully navigating the uncharted territory of their new relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, and for Evelyn, that was enough. When she hung up the phone, she felt a strange sense of peace. She had taken the first step toward healing her relationship with her father, but more importantly, she had taken control of her own life. She had chosen Logan, chosen their future, and now she was choosing to move forward, not just with him, but in all aspects of her life. Logan walked over, handing her a plate of dinner and sitting beside her on the bed. "Everything okay?" he asked, sensing the change in her mood. Evelyn smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Yeah, everything's okay." As they ate together, talking and laughing, the weight of the past finally began to lift. Their future was theirs to build, and for the first time in a long time, Evelyn felt truly free. She had fought for her happiness, for her love, and now, standing on the other side of that battle, she knew that the life ahead of her was one worth living, because it was her life, built on her terms, with the man she loved by her side.